Hi, I'm Chuck Russell. I directed The Mask, and I guess we're going to watch it together. I will tell you everything I know about The Mask as I see it before my eyes, and as you watch it, I hope for the second time. First time would be just horrible listening to me prattle on about it. This is the first time we used New Line's fancy new logo. They were very excited about that, and it is a nice one. Here's the most interesting thing about the beginning of the picture. I shot an entire prologue that actually came out beautifully of Leif Erikson and the Vikings arriving at the New Land with a chest that included the mask. It turns out Leif Erikson wasn't looking for the New World. He just wanted to sail as far as he could to get rid of the thing. And it match cuts with this Master of Edge City, which is a beautiful digitally composed matte painting by Industrial Light and Magic. But we no longer got to see our Vikings because in the final cut, it did slow things down. And this shot ultimately was the first reveal of our mask. By the way, these kinds of things are always a headache. This was shot in a tank. It's the size of a very small room. That we had to borrow from Baywatch, so you never know what you're seeing on film, folks. It's all an illusion. This is the mask's first evil bit of magic, is that he who opens the case has to beware or pipes will fall upon their head. Actually, I always loved this shot. It's one of the more lyrical moments. And our glowing radioactive logo. I chose to set the movie in a place called Edge City because The Mask is for me, a little bit of a romantic fable. I wanted to keep an edge of unreality about the piece, and a city that could really be any city and still had a little bit of a romantic or fairy tale quality about it. Jim Carrey, I had been looking for a project for Jim for 3 or 4 years since I'd first seen his stand-up act, and when we cast him for this picture, he was only known as the white guy in Living Color, his television series. And it was remarkable that we were able to work out his schedule to do the show. And ultimately what appealed to him and me both about this piece was taking Jim and getting him to play his natural charm for this kind of silly, sweet Stanley Ipkiss character, and then playing his really extreme physical comedy that he's been known for as The Mask, and try to separate the two characters well. For me, that means I had to have Jim trust me and not go for a laugh every second. His background has been sketch humor and sitcoms and stand-up, where if you don't have a laugh line at the end of every sentence, you get worried. But he trusted me, and Stanley Ipkiss ended up being a character that I just enjoyed. He's just a nice guy trying to get by in Edge City, where it's very difficult to get by. Right now he's getting advice from his best friend, who always has terrible advice, played by Richard Jenny, who actually comes also from stand-up comedy, and is so slick. We kind of hate him, but we kind of love him too.
On the town.
I spent a long time reading ladies. I guess that always sounds funny, but it's crucial to find the right leading lady for a show like this. And giving her the right kind of introduction was very important to me. And this is one hell of an introduction. The rain, the moment finding the girl when she at least doesn't really know she's fixing herself up, a little lightning in the background, and Cameron Diaz. And I really had the vision that changes Stanley Ipkiss forever. Not to mention the famous shot that I think belongs to Steven Spielberg, originally used in Jaws, where you dolly in and pull back on your zoom lens, or you dolly back and pull forward on your zoom lens. It's your choice.
You know, you're lucky you caught me. I was just on my way out to it, right?
This is a bank from downtown LA that was really just gorgeous, period-looking bank that had been closed for years. It's one of those things you can find in Los Angeles. It's like location gold. And Mask was done on actually a very limited budget compared to studio standards. Almost every other picture that was a leading picture that opened in this summer of '94 was budgeted anywhere from $60 million, which I believe was the budget of Maverick, to about 120, which I believe was the budget of True Lies. We did The Mask for $18 million, all in with these special effects, so we had to use our wits on these locations, and it was very dramatic. Craig Stearns, our art director, did a terrific, rather production designer, I'm sorry, I have to use the correct term, these guys are now production designers, did a great job working with me, finding sort of period fantasy-looking locations that could be anywhere from the 40s to the present day, and keep us in this kind of slightly romanticized world I wanted to set the picture in.
Right. You know, it sort of looks like, a young woman riding bareback. Sort of a Lady Godiva.
This is Cameron's first piece of work on the film. It was her first day shooting, and it remains one of her best scenes. She was game, very very brave girl. She actually had no acting background, but she's what we call a natural. She has a lot of heart and takes direction beautifully, and it takes a lot of courage to get in front of a camera and really not pose, really try to do something. And her and Jim had great chemistry together from the first time I've read them.
Now, how about that account, huh? We have several different plans. Trading.
When you're doing a comedy, it's important to try to punctuate things with just something a little physical, even in a scene where you're playing it for charm.
Savings, checking in CDs, T-bills.
One thing we did, you might notice there's a very golden tone to some of these sets. It's something my cinematographer, John Leonetti, and I chose to do, is keep things warm, again, to give it just a little bit of a period feel. And, of course, now we introduce our villains.
Now just a little bit to the right here.
And we've just gone from a location to a set. We're inside four walls in a warehouse, not even a real stage, with a blown-out backlight. And once again, this is one of my cinematographer's best lighting jobs. I really wanted a great, warm, almost 40s look for my characters. Our heavy, Peter Green, is a terrific actor. Part of one thing I'm proud of is this cast partially by design and partially by necessity, our new faces. And Peter's just been doing some terrific work. After this, he did a Quentin Tarantino picture called Pulp Fiction. And I believe at the moment he's playing a heavy in a high-budget Steven Seagal picture. I wish him luck.
First we take the bank, then we take Nico, and then my friend's school is out. And this whole city is our playground.
I have to tell you, there's always, no matter how many pictures you do, there's always a strange leap of faith to shoot out a window that really isn't a window. And I'm always glad that those scenes work when I see them cut together. There's part of me just knowing it'll never play, no matter what I know intellectually. This is the building that was used in Ghostbusters as the Ghostbusters garage. When you're on a limited budget, you've got to find the most fascinating locations available and go with them. And sometimes it seems like a coincidence, but it really isn't. There's only certain period buildings in LA that are this unusual. You're looking at two terrific character actors here. This is John Williams and Tim Bagley. Tim, who wears the glasses, is right here as one of the cast of the Groundling Theater in Los Angeles, very well known for improvisational comedy. And when I mix comedians, bringing in guys that know improv is the best way to go. You have a lot more fun on set, it's a little looser, and you can come up with new things all the time. Leaving a little room for improvisation was important for me and for Jim Carrey especially. And we had to make sure we stuck with the script, but I always wanted to leave a little room for something new and great that would come up. I should mention, this project was originally intended to be a horror film by New Line Pictures, and I turned it down, saying that the comic book concept of a man putting on a mask was so exciting and so resonant, but I really felt that we should do a mainstream comedy with it, if not a quirky comedy. And New Line, I believe, was looking for a new Freddy Krueger to start a new franchise of horror films with. So we actually parted ways. It wasn't until a year later, when New Line had 3 scripts written that were quite a bit more violent, where the individual would put on the mask and then tend to kill people. They came back to me and said, "What was this idea you had again? The scripts didn't quite work, the ideas weren't quite that great." And I had said I wanted to bring in this actor Jim Carrey, I wanted to use this colorful sort of 40s nightclub concept, and this doggy, and do a comedy adventure with the mask. And behind all that, I knew I could use computer graphics for the first time in comedy and in dance, when I'd seen them used beautifully in pictures like T2 and The Abyss and, of course, Jurassic Park. I'd never seen computer graphics used for straight comedy. And Jim Carrey is very particular to my whole take on this project. Getting Jim was important to me, because I knew the man was halfway to being a human cartoon as it is. And if I had Industrial Light and Magic and the current technology to take him the rest of the way into the cartoon land, I knew I'd have something special.
Ah, jeez.
I apologize for this well-known slapstick moment.
Mr. Ipkiss. Hi.
Once again, whenever I did a reveal of the girl, I'm doing this classic 40s style. When Cameron steps out of a car, we're always especially careful with the lighting and making sure we play to Jim's fantasy or his weaknesses here.
Your car, sir. That's not my car. But it matches the ticket. All right. I'll take it.
I'll confess that all this is based on going to New York for the first time on a writing assignment for me when I was in my 20s and realizing I couldn't get in the hip nightclubs. It just stunned me. I was stunned that there are people in front of nightclubs with lists who make obvious choices as to whether or not you deserve to go in the nightclub or not. It seemed like I'd entered some trendy communist country. So these scenes are my small revenge on those clubs. Here's another good example of the fact that we wanted to do something that had a bit of fantasy to it, in that the blues are so rich. My cinematographer was delighted that I was willing to take things this far and do them this stylized. But again, I wanted a beautiful, glamorous world and a fairy tale story, so we allowed ourselves to take license with the look of Edge City and the world that Stanley Ipkiss is trying to make his way through. I'll tell you something interesting about this sequence. Of course, the trick car was fun to create. But what I really wanted to do, this happens in reality to be a bridge that opens in the center and is functional. It lifts up from the middle to let boats go under it. And I wanted the bridge then to begin to lift after this final moment of the car being destroyed, and Stanley slowly realizing he's rising at a diagonal, and then have the wreck of the car slide down after him and literally chase him to the bottom of the bridge. Of course, budget restraints being what they are, we decided that we didn't decide, we were told the car gag was enough on its own.
Hey, mister! Hold on! I know CPR!
This scene's interesting to me because this is one of those rough nights where we had been behind schedule and had an awful lot of night lighting to do and difficult logistics with things floating in the water. It may seem strange, but this is a big part of filmmaking. I had one night to do this entire sequence in, including the bit with the car and the crane down from the bridge, and it was do or die. I had to get it all, or I was going to have to cut some part of the sequence. And it was a very special evening for me because the crew knew we were in trouble. There's a sense of this kind of pressure on a show when it comes down, and they moved absolutely like an Olympic sailboat team. We really just got everything we had to have, one shot after the other. Jim, by the way, pulled me into this water with him. I think making the point that the actor isn't the only one who has to get wet before the end of the night. It was this... I'm talking about the pressure, I have to also admit this. This was the most fun set I'd been on, and pretty much anybody in the picture had been on. In fact, I felt it was part of my job to keep things fun around the camera, so that everyone from Jim, who's just one of the most terrific comedians you'll ever meet, through Cameron Diaz, who was totally inexperienced at the time, would have a level of fun already on the set that wouldn't be a grim set for us to be playful in. This movie requires a lot of playfulness, and comedy requires a lot of courage. You really are standing there in a silent room with 100 crew people watching you, trying to be natural and a bit silly. It's tough. The only thing that was almost more important to me than casting a brand new leading lady was the casting of this dog. My producers thought I was out of my mind because to most people a dog is a dog, but I have two dogs and they have very strong personalities. And I actually did several days of doggy casting to find Max, who you're seeing in this scene, who plays Milo. And never has a braver, more wonderful dog been trapped in a little doggy body. He was the perfect dog for us because he was smart. He was very happy in his work, which I think is often a function of the trainers. This dog lives with a normal family and is only taken out to work with trainers on special shows and special gigs. So I think it had a little more of a natural, sweet personality than some of the other professional Hollywood dogs. So I got to tell you, Max never slowed me down. Working with dogs is every director's nightmare. And frankly, Jim is such a good improvisational comedian that things Max would do that weren't exactly what was planned end up looking natural because Jim's responses are so natural. It's the benefit of improvisational comedy and that's in Jim's background. There's also, without a doubt, you don't just get this stuff. I find doggy tricks tremendously boring in film. And what's more interesting is the expressions and the eye lines I can get from the dog that tells me it's having an opinion of its master's stupidity or the danger of the situation. When Lassie goes and opens the door to the burning barn, I'm bored. But when Milo is wondering just what the heck the mask is, I always find him interesting. Here's our first CG effect in the film, and I wanted it to be a little subtle, but some people wouldn't call that too subtle. Here's the fun of this picture. It's an opportunity to combine something a little scary with something funny. I wanted to have it both ways. You never quite know what's going to happen when the mask goes on. Steve Williams, who was one of our key effects guys, just did a terrific job. There was no mask on Jim's face in that last shot, or in that shot. We simply did it with him running his fingers down his naked face and put the mask in later. That's how advanced the computer graphics have gotten at this point. This tornado was always a key image of mine, and we spent a lot of time experimenting with the look of it. There you go. Jim Carrey's energy just carries this character through. I talked at length with him about it, and we wanted to create a character that would play almost like a classic silent movie character. Let's face it, the mask is loud, but his motions are very dance-like. His gestures and his actions are nearly Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, not to overstate the classics, but that's what we were going for. And also, the comedy here is very universal. It's clearly inspired by a lot of cartoons I was brain-fed when I was young. I would have to particularly point to Tex Avery, whose cartoons had kind of danger and anarchy lurking beneath them, which is one of the things I wanted to do in this picture. The mask makes you laugh, but you're never quite sure whether what he's going to do is dangerous or not. There we go. That was our first, what we call the Auga face. And the Pogo Man. Every effect takes so much time. They go by very quickly. But every effect takes so much time and really months of work that you get pet names for all of them.
Look, Ma! I'm rotating!
The fact is, I recognized that I was doing things I'd seen in cartoons, but I always wanted to add a bit more and make them our own if they seemed too familiar. So those eyeballs snapping up into his face at the last second were just something a little extra. Again, this particular horn is my desire to try to keep a fairy tale flavor. That's a little bit of an Alice in Wonderland prop to me. Squeeze me gently, and when you do, of course, you get this huge living foghorn. And now the mask is having a night on the town, so I wanted to see how much trouble we could get him into, and we invented, for absolutely no logical reason, a handy street gang to harass him, so we could show off some mask fun. When the mask goes on, a lot of reality rules went out the window. There has to be internal logic to any film, whether it's a straight drama or whether it's a Star Wars. And finding your tone and being consistent as a filmmaker is important. And these things on paper were questioned by the company when they just were in a screenplay. But I knew that if we built up what the mask was and who Stanley Ipkiss was and exploded them when we put the two elements together, I would be able to get away with murder. And this scene was one of our more fun scenes to do.
There you go, son. I got out of here, by the way.
Thanks.
Wow.
Now.
That was an improv moment. I did not know Jim was going to pull that out of his pocket, so I actually had to cut my own laughter off the soundtrack.
A French poodle.
And I'll tell you that he did have to learn some balloon work for this, but a lot of it was pulling aperture, changing film speeds as he was working. We did it very smoothly, so you couldn't quite tell when it was speeded up or not. And of course, here's the first time we replaced the balloons with a computer graphic effect.
A Tommy gun.
If Jim had to tell you one thing that was the most fun thing he got to do in the film, I think he always wanted to shoot a Tommy gun. He went crazy. I could not stop him. What you saw on the screen was 1/10 of what we did. He unloaded the Tommy gun on 4 different takes, and he was a very happy man getting to do it.
Superhero.
I could fight crime, protect the innocent.
I should mention right now, Greg Canham did the mask makeup effects for me, and it was based very truly on the comic book. The visual of the character in the comic was stunning. We departed from the story in the original comic, and we departed from the intent, or the kind of scary, gory elements of the original comic. But one thing I always loved was this sort of dangerous-looking green skull-like face. The trick was not to bury Jim Carrey under rubber. And it looks like a simple makeup design, and I suppose it is, but ultimately it was, I believe, about 17 separate pieces of latex that Greg and his team created to make it look like one seamless effect so that the face could be expressive, if not more expressive than Jim usually is. That is a big trick. Normally when you cover your actor in latex, you lose all the subtlety in his expressions, and a big part of Jim Carrey's comedy, obviously, is the expressiveness of his face. So that took, a number of weeks or even months to perfect, but the final touch, I needed to create a character that had its own identity, and I didn't want you to think, well, this is an alien or this is something I've seen before. So the giant teeth ended up being what really made this character unique. It changed the look of Jim's skeletal structure, literally, because those teeth were so big. And I think it helps make that a memorable face and a unique character you haven't exactly seen before. And again, it enhanced a cartoony look, even though I made Greg create the teeth out of very real-looking denture material. We had those huge sort of piano key size teeth that made it look sort of funny and scary at the same time. Once that was perfected, and I could see that Jim's expressiveness was, if anything, enhanced by that face, I knew we had the character. And the first time Jim did a makeup test, I had him wear the zoot suit and do the whole thing, and I have to tell you, that's when the character really came together. Something special always happened after sitting zen-like for 4 hours in makeup to Jim Carrey. He really used to come out of the trailer as the Mask, and it was something always surprising was going to happen.
Oh my God.
Late!
Keys. Where's the keys? Damn.
It was important to me that we show this dog's personality early on, so Milo is an impossibly smart dog, and he may find your keys for you, but whether he gives them back to you once he finds them is the question. And that's essentially the way my dogs are, and it's something I'd never seen on film, and I thought would be an interesting thing to start building up and paying off in some of the comedy gags. And anytime you can create a little extra physical comedy, even something as small as that for Jim, you're going to get a little bit more on the screen. That's a mask on a fishing line. Some of these gags are so simple, they're embarrassing to tell you how we did them. It's either high-tech computers that we put our money into, or just bubblegum and fishing wire. This was my biggest directorial risk, is the famous mufflers in the butt routine. I always wondered whether it was going to remain in the film because it was so outrageous, but it always got a laugh, and I shot it in a way I hope wasn't totally tasteless. It was just one of those things that the Mask would do. We did all this bank stuff first in our schedule. Every movie, the schedule is, you imagine, I suppose, a film would be shot in some kind of chronological order. But, of course, we did all these scenes right in a row, and it's part of any film director's job to keep the story on course and keep the actors in line for at what point they're at emotionally in the story. It's easier for them to lose track in one day on the set shooting scenes that will be in 6 different places in the movie.
Oh, really? Well, the next time she comes in, you be sure to send her to my office.
Now, this scene required Jim to have had his first night out as the Mask. He looks just a little tired and disheveled. And in fact, even in the makeup, we did just a trace of darkness under his eyes and made him look a little sleepy. And he's going in his first degree of being rattled. And you'll see him progressively, as Stanley, get a little more and more manic over the course of the show. He's always just trying to be a nice guy, though, Stanley Ipkiss. And in Edge City, that's impossible.
Put it in a blender and hit Shrapay. You don't need her, man. You need somebody a little more down to earth. Somebody with some integrity. Somebody with red hair and full pouting lips, a white blouse.
This is Amy Yazbek, who plays the classic Lois Lane reporter. And I knew it would be interesting when I started developing the story we used ultimately in The Mask, to have one girl we knew was bad for our hero because the bombshell just never ends up being good for you, and one girl who we knew would be good for him, someone who's smart and charming like Peggy the reporter. She's also a little bit nosy, and there was an interesting balance playing the two scenes to show Stanley being attracted to both characters, and my hope is the audience at this point wouldn't quite be sure who the love interest would end up being.
It's all coming back to me. Miss, what'd you say your name was?
Peggy Brandt.
Wait a minute. Peggy Brandt? Of Ask Peggy?
Yeah, that's right.
You printed one of my letters last year. Remember? Nice guys finish last.
You're Mr. Nice Guy?
Yes!
Oh, Stanley, do you realize how much mail we got about that letter? I mean, there are literally hundreds of women out there looking for a guy just like you.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know how hard it is to find a decent man in this town? Most of them think monogamy's some kind of wood.
So, why are you covering this story?
Because dear Peggy pays Dick. I'm starving to death. I'm looking to become a real reporter. Look, Stanley.
These are some of the scenes I like the most because Jim came through for me on a couple levels here. His other work, including Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber, and it's this kind of scene where he still keeps his wit and humor, but is playing a very kind of naturalistic performance. He's in trouble. He's a little desperate, but he's still so expressive and fun. Jim Carrey always brought a little extra energy even to the more subtle scenes like this.
You really think hundreds of women are looking for a guy like me?
Sure. I'm one of them.
Here's our heavy, and Peter Green is in trouble with his boss at this point.
Hello, Dorian.
This is one of those scenes that I can say, if you only knew. It looks nice. Leonetti did a great job with it. But this is one of those scenes I had to rewrite at the very last second. That golf machine he's hitting his golf ball into in the background was something we actually built on the moment. We had always planned this golf gag. This, to me, was an important, strange bit of gangster tension. And but the golf machine itself is just rope with fluorescent spray paint on it. He was supposed to be hitting golf balls off his balcony, but for technical reasons we just couldn't do that. And again, this was one of those scenes that, in fact, I had only part of a day to shoot. So you learn to use your wits, and at the end of the day, I think the scene plays very well this way. Watch this hit of Peter Green, and I will tell you what happens.
You're good, Joe.
Whack. We substituted a golf pro for that close-up, and we were convinced it was safe by the golf pro, and in fact it was, but the club actually hit Peter Green's nose. You should probably play that back if you can in slow motion. But Peter Green's nose actually got hit's probably an overstatement. The fact that it tagged his nose at all scared the shit out of him. He thought he actually got the full swing, and there was no harm done, but it was very disturbing that we even came that close. But it was a short swing, it wasn't a full swing. It still was pretty scary. Here's my dream sequence. This is one of the things that when you're at the screenplay point as a director, you're often forced to defend certain scenes the studio doesn't quite get. And let's admit it, this is a weird digression in the story. The story didn't need this scene, but I had to fight hard to do it. And it's ultimately such a silly scene, but I felt the movie needed it at this point. I think it was important that the mask himself wasn't the only really humorous thing in the movie. I wanted Stanley Ipkiss to get some laughs, and I wanted the style of the film to get some laughs. So this moment with Cameron licking his ear, and of course doing this weird cut to the dog, was one of the things I actually had to fight for. Because in the screenplay it didn't seem important, but I defended it. That camera turning shot is worth looking at again, too. We did not have the proper equipment to do it, and it was something that John Leonetti, my DP, faked brilliantly. We did a lighting change as we turned the camera, and did a match cut as close as we could. And then I actually ended up repositioning it in post-production so it was a perfect match. It's the kind of shot normally you would spend a lot of time and money on getting just right, and in fact, we just faked it and made the cross cut from the nightclub to the close-up of his face in bed match. This is one of my favorite sequences. This has, again, both the kind of danger or tension of not knowing what's going to happen when you put the mask on, and the payoff is pretty good. It's different than the first time. It's a little bit more fun than the first time, and now we have some real story reasons. His love for the girl, for him to want to put the mask on. So it's important you build and don't just repeat yourself. So I was pretty pleased with the way this worked out. You'll notice when the tornado appears here, we did optical shakes to give it weight when it lands. Boom, the whole room shakes. I was always concerned about interacting. These kind of effects really count on wind and lighting interactive, so you can feel like the effect is indeed taking place in the room. This is a scene we actually shot having no idea how it was going to cut together. I just said, I believe in static cameras, and again, I believe in silent comedy techniques. And I wanted the character to be a silent comedy character. And in the end, we thought we were going to do some very elaborate special effects there. We kept it very simple, just cutting from one gag to the next. And this last bit was completely unplanned, which is rare for opticals. We had the shot, and we decided to stretch his arm out at the end of it, just to give it a little rubber band ending to the scene. How's it going, Freeze?
Looking good here, my man. Okay, you boys are on your own now. I gotta get downstairs and make sure I'm seen.
Here's our bank robbery. You know, it's a shame to sit and watch a film. I'm very proud of this film. It's a very fun film. But every director has usually higher goals. And what you achieve is usually plenty. There was quite a bit more to this bank heist that I wanted to do. And at the end of the day, it's fine. It's what it's meant to be. I had planned a major shootout at the end.
Sorry, fellas. Where's not what now?
This was our first tornado effect, and in fact took us quite a bit of time to figure out how to shoot it. Ultimately, there was a shootout that went on with the police and our villains here, and as you know, schedule and time. You end up having to create ways in your style of filmmaking to correct when you're literally unable to get something because of the studio, the budget. This was a case where I thought I'd do an optical, but I found a limousine that was so goddamn long I didn't have to do one. Can you believe that in Los Angeles you can really... Obviously, I used the limousine twice in the cuts to make it appear even longer than it is, but it actually makes you laugh just to see this limousine. Anyone who would rent it, seriously, is pretty pompous.
Franklin, Grant, and Jackson.
This was a scene we actually shot months after the original production. It was one of the scenes that... the company insisted I not shoot because of schedule and time, and they realized when I showed them the cut how badly we needed, so I got to go back and recreate things. And going back months after principal photography to shoot something, it's very tough getting the same energy again, so I'm proud that we all rose to the occasion, and it matches everything else. Here you see the real 40s influence. My grandparents were part of the Roaring Twenties in Chicago. My grandpa used to play Dixieland and speakeasies. He used to play trumpet, so I grew up listening to a lot of these Cab Calloway songs and old ballads, and I got my chance to really use some of that influence in this film.
Christmas, a diamond ring, a Cadillac car.
This scene is part of what originally sold the film. Some of the early tests and drawings I did of these next faces you'll see were what were presented to some of the international distributors at in the Cannes Film Festival almost a year prior to shooting the film. This is the ultimate Auga face. And of course, the classic Tex Avery wolf is coming up after this. This is all just terrific work, because, you know, when we start a film like this, writing effects you've never seen before, you take on a challenge, and I just think it was such a uniquely fun experience that the ultimate results came out this well. There's a real colorful, romantic, almost toy box looks to some of these things that I think are really exceeded what I'd hoped to do. When we work on these shots, I'm involved with at least up to 15 passes on each shot. When I say passes, I mean I sit down with the animators at Industrial Light and Magic and their computers and go over them frame by frame. And we have, of course, original designs and storyboards to go from, but it's surprisingly not unlike cell animation doing these things. If you're able to, on your Laserdisc deck, play those faces back in slow motion. There's so many cool little faces inside of each one. And those are the frames we worked on to give each face a lot of wobble, I call it, a lot of mass and physics. We call it Tex Avery physics. So it wasn't just cutting to an optical. So you felt like there was actually a flesh and blood man changing into something. This is a great number. This band, Royal Crown Review, was a band playing locally in San Francisco and sort of recreating Jitterbug. And I heard the song way in pre-production and said, this has got to be my dance number. I knew I wanted to do a ballistic Jitterbug number, and I wanted to take it further optically than was ever humanly possible. There are doubles. Those are the doubles right there, in fact, you're seeing. That's, of course, Jim. But Cameron and Jim did 90% of these shots. They both worked their asses off in dance rehearsal. And Jim's very hard to duplicate. He can do things with his body nobody can do that aren't exactly dance moves, but if you do them to music, they are dance moves. So we used our dance doubles in the final cut, much less than I ever would have guessed. And of course, we're all very proud of that.
Eddie? Who did this, man?
Peter Green has a really believable intensity, and in a comedy, it's easy to overlook the villains. But he's the real deal. He's an actor to keep your eye on. This is my own fantasy sequence. I mean, let's face it. Everyone has always wanted to just take over the nightclub, and we call this effect Crazy Legs. It was actually one of the much more difficult effects to do. You never know which one's going to catch you, but getting the cloth on his legs and the physics of the rubbery look of his legs right was really difficult. This tornado piece is just completely over the top, but I thought it would work, and I think it does. It's the single most ridiculous effect that happens to a real person in the movie. This is all right here, Jim and Cameron. That's great. Great work.
I want this place cleared right now!
And of course, he kisses her the way no one else can, and if you blow a girl's shoes off, you know you got her. Here's where we took off again from reality. This is a sequence where I don't like farce. I like when you care about the characters. So it's always a risk when you absolutely throw reality out the window. And I felt at this point, if the mask was working, you believed in the mask's sort of magical comedic powers. I always wanted to take what he does a step further each time and keep surprising the audience. So the appearance of the calculator and some of these wardrobe changes coming up are once again classic things from golden era cartoons and Jim Carrey in my imagination.
Thank you very much.
Jim fought for that Elvis. You know, once again, time was a restraint, and they literally wanted us not to do the Elvis. And Jim would not go home until we shot the Elvis. And of course, it's the biggest laugh in the sequence. Death scene actually does deserve an Oscar as far as I'm concerned. I'm just sorry the Academy doesn't have a sense of humor enough to pick up on it.
It's getting dark. Tell Annie M to little yell her out.
What I think about when I watch these scenes is we had such fun making them. I think it's a bit contagious when you have fun on the set doing these things. And when you give someone like Jim freedom and in fact, push him a little further in some of these gags, I think it shows on film, and it's one of the things that makes it an attractive film to watch. I always wanted to do that shot where the audience stands up and claps. Watch Peter Green here. He's very interesting. He feels sort of trapped, as if he suddenly appeared in front of the Academy crowd without knowing it, and then he kind of recovers then. Peter really was curious as to how he was meant to play that scene, and I explained, hey, Dorian, your character, suddenly finds himself facing an Academy Award audience. Doesn't question it, but gets nervous about being there.
Hey, Calloway!
Peter Riegert, our detective here, is a terrific, seasoned character actor, and I was really happy to get him in the show. His part was a difficult part to cast correctly because I wanted someone we liked chasing the mask, and yet I wanted a legitimate threat to the mask. This is a comedy. Riegert's a real pro and fun to work with, and he can play tough, but there's a certain warmth to his character where you know that underneath it all he's a nice guy. I think he enjoyed playing a little bit the tough guy sometimes. He has played versions of a nice guy in a lot of different films, and I think he enjoyed playing a cop. The famous pajama clue.
Ipkiss.
Ripkiss, I know you're in there.
One of the things I'm most proud of is when we got laughs with Jim not as the mask. It seemed like the mask was, between the opticals and the makeup and Jim's performance, was so in the bag that creating sequences with good classic comedy in them for the Stanley character was important to me. And this was one of the more successful ones. I love seeing Stanley panicking. And here's where, again, we use the fact that Milo will never quite let go of things he fetches. And this was ad-libbed. That dog was not trained to hang on that long. And Jim just played it. I had no idea the dog would lift off the ground hanging onto the Frisbee.
Hi, Lieutenant. Listen, this isn't the best time right now. Won't you come in?
These were actually the final days of shooting the way this was scheduled. And although we were pressured in finishing up the show on schedule and getting things done, these were the days when Jim, just because he perhaps didn't have to sit through the makeup, would come up with very strange things to do to entertain himself and the rest of us. And this particular day was Dog Day, where everybody on the cast and crew was given a makeup dog eye, and a little bit like the dog in the Little Rascals. And Jim would give them all dog names. And I know in hindsight this sounds ridiculous, but after shooting The Mask for months on long hours, it's the kind of thing that made life livable and a lot of fun, in fact.
Wow, look at that guy. Nobody's that fast at my bank. I'll say.
Seemed like that had to be shot actually backwards. I knew I wanted to end on a certain freeze frame, so I had Jim pose perfectly for that freeze frame. And I actually staged him at each different point you saw there in the bank doing his actions and cut. And then Industrial Light and Magic did the in-betweens with all the streaking. So Jim never actually ran around that room. I just blocked him in each of those different motions and different points in the bank. Sounds easy now, but took us a while to figure out just how to do that shot.
You understand? I want him here tomorrow, alive. You still hit? Come on, let's go!
And once again, part of the fun for me was trying to capture some of the classic feeling of the 30s and 40s with my villain and my leading lady here. And this lighting and this look is one of the best pieces of work that our cinematographer did, in my opinion.
Maybe you did.
Truthfully, this was one of the better scenes for both actors, and it's just one of those things that, as it went on, it had to be edited, because as it went on, it was becoming its own movie. I suddenly felt like we'd lost track of the comedy we were doing. Here's Jim's most desperate Stanley. He hasn't slept for days. He's been the Mask a couple of times, and he knows he's responsible for everything he sees. And he finally snaps, and Jim did a terrific job here.
Before I tell your daddy you're running this place like it's your own personal piggy bank. Or maybe we should call the IRS and see if we can arrange a little vacation for you at Club Fat! That'll be all, Ipkiss.
Genius. That was genius, buddy. I have chills. God, what side of whose bed did you wake up on, man?
I'm not sure. I haven't exactly been myself lately.
Well, you don't look real fabulous, Stan.
Really? Do I look bad?
Not to worry. This will put the color back in your cheeks, my friend. 2 tickets to the charity ball at the Coco Bongo Club this Saturday night. Anybody who's anybody will be there. Want to be my date?
God, Charlie, Wait just a minute. Tina, what are you doing here?
I just wanted to thank you, but, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have much to open an account with.
This is the point in the story where I wanted to soften the Tina character and try to play her a little more like a real woman instead of the cartoon girl, and see if we can get the connection. Stanley by now has fallen for her, and she in fact is more interested in the Mask, so it was an interesting thing to play in this scene. One thing you don't take into account, and you shouldn't when you watch a film, but this particular scene was shot probably at 2 o'clock in the morning with us throwing our own lights on the windows, and it was absolutely the worst thing for the actors, because you do get tired, you forget your lines. It's when the real craft of working professionals is essential to keep your energy up and do all the technical dance parts of these shots where they're hitting their marks and getting their lines right is so tough after a long day. And it's one of those things that was just a shame this particular scene ended up working so late. I'm proud of the scene. I think they did a fine job, but it was a miserable night getting this done.
Wouldn't mind.
It's not all fun and games, folks. Trust me.
You do?
We're old college buddies, him and me. It's funny you should mention the way he dances, because, I taught him a couple of dance moves myself.
Do you think you can have him meet me tonight?
I might be able to work something out.
How about at Landfill Park?
Okay, sunset.
Perfect.
Super.
Thanks, Stanley. You really are a nice guy.
Ben Stein, who plays our psychiatrist, is a unique actor. He always plays the same part. You've seen him in television commercials and different films. And I think directorial ego makes you want to do something new with each actor. But when Ben Stein came in to read for this part, I actually just plain rewrote the part for Ben. He is unique, and the dryness of his humor and the deadpan style of his takes works really well against Jim. And of course, for this scene, Stanley's at his most desperate, and Ben's dry humor in response to that was just a lot of fun to play. So I literally threw the original scene out when I read Ben. I taped him. I let him just improv the whole scene. Jim wasn't available to us, so I just worked with him myself, and we rewrote all of his dialogue that afternoon and of the rehearsal. And I think it worked out very well here in this scene.
See ya.
This whole concept of the mask not working at this point, it's interesting to me. No one questions me about this now. It comes from a different ending I originally worked out, where we realized the mask only works at nighttime. There was a reason for that. The original ending used that as an element, and we actually rewrote the ending for budgetary reasons. I'm very happy with the current ending, and I'm glad it worked out that way in hindsight. But in future masks, there's now a deal for a Mask 2 to be made. In future masks, I'll bet we do use this device, because that mask loses its power when the sun comes up. Here it's just pretty funny, but as a plot device, it's still real useful, and I think we ought to use it. It's interesting. It puts a limit on what you can do as the mask, and a natural clock on when you've got to finish your task as the mask. When the sun comes up, it turns back to what it is.
As the mask, because they are both one and the same beautiful person.
Got the cross-check on the fingerprints for you. It's Ipkiss, all right.
I'm looking at him. Just keep the SWAT team standing by. If this guy's half as bad as he's supposed to be, we're gonna have a full dance guard.
Jim Dugan here is another member of the Groundlings Theater. At least that's his background, and is another actor who is always giving me small takes and small things that we can expand on when we needed it. I tried to surround the secondary parts with experienced comedy improv people, so that when we needed a little something extra, I had someone with some imagination to work with. And if you watch Dugan in the Searching the Pockets scene that's coming up, he's hysterically funny, his takes to what he finds in the mask's pockets. I always wanted to keep Edge City alive, or the concept of Edge City, so the idea of Landfill Park as another awful kind of contemporary thing we've learned to put up with is funny to me. And the fact that the sunset over Edge City is beautiful because of the emissions from Landfill Park it's actually a scientific fact. The pollution in the air in Los Angeles is often what makes the more brilliant colors in the sunsets out here.
My friend will be along here any minute. I better go.
Stanley, wait. Stanley? Stanley!
It was fun. I discovered it was actually harder to put that tornado behind the trees the way I wanted it to than to put it in front. But I'd seen so many tornadoes, I wanted to do something different. So this is the French Mask, Pepe Le Pew inspired probably. And again, I'm building dance moves into everything he does, so that when he does dance, it seems natural to the character. And it was a lot of fun for Jim and me both to be working those things out. He's just a terrific dancer and singer, and it's one of his lesser-known abilities we could capitalize on.
See, it's so coy.
I love it!
By the way, these teeth are the largest teeth. I thought we would only be using them in silent bits, and Jim learned to speak with them for everything because he wanted the most extreme face too. So if you look at those dentures, try talking through something like that sometime. It's a real unusual art. All right, this is a gag that ended up being one of the cutest gags in the show that actually we made up on the spot. It's the only improvised optical. Again, we're 3 o'clock in the morning here. Everybody was a little overtired. And he was supposed to offer her cigarettes, and in a high-speed sequence, fill her mouth with like a dozen different kinds of cigarettes, and then light them with a blowtorch. And that was a physical gag that didn't work. It just literally didn't work when I was supposed to shoot it. So Jim actually suggested he blew a heart and then snorted an arrow through it, and I thought that was hysterical. Didn't know that if we could pull it off for sure later, but we shot it with the VistaVision camera in hopes we could do that optical, and indeed, it ended up being, I think, one of the better gags in the show. And it's the only optical in the picture that was actually improvised on the spot.
I'm glad I tell ya!
What are they gonna do to me, Sarge? What are they gonna do?
Sorry, son. That's not my department. Search him.
Ow! Where's a camcorder when you need one?
Stock shot. Well, actually, that was our own stock shot we created. This is a 2-wall set, shot in the back of the warehouse. I had about 10 minutes to do it. It was pre-lit. It's funny to think of all these things, and the truth is, it's not important to the audience, but it's part of what's challenging about filmmaking. This was originally supposed to be an entire computer graphics sequence, but again, we had a financial problem, so all I did was just do the simple version. We cut his pants off at the knee and had prop people handing things up through his pants, which Jim never let us forget. But you know what? It works anyway. Sometimes the simplest approach can be the best, and we saved the real extreme opticals for when we really needed them. This is just a speeded up camera again. Not yet, but right when he starts slapping them, we sped it up a bit. And right here we sped it up a bit. The for me is to keep changing speed within a setup without cutting. So there's some magic to it. It's no fun just to cut to a high-speed camera. This is another one of those gags where we created the in-between blurs. This is the scariest face in the movie. I wanted a real shock there, and I actually sketched that, and we wondered whether we'd have people screaming instead of laughing, but it did work. This wall, by the way, you're seeing behind Jim, this scene was shot in 3 different locations, partially because of the practicality and partially because of time, but we actually dragged that wall behind him to 3 different locations. This angle you're seeing is the back lot at Warner's. This angle you're seeing was when we did the park scene, we did part of it there, and we actually did it behind our own stages. We never could quite finish this angle. So, again, that's part of film directing. You've got to know your shots, and you have to be able to break down a scene when you get in trouble, and know what you can pick up later. So I made sure we covered everything looking towards the police on the days when we had all the police and all the production values, and everything looking towards the back of that wall. I knew I could pick up later. I concentrated on really getting a great dance number done with all these different physical gags, and knew I could leave those shots with him against the wall till later if necessary. This girl wasn't one of the dancers I picked, and I'm telling you, I love what she did. The joy of her of the mask's magic taking her over and making her begin to sing is really works in this scene. And I have to tell you, of all the things in the movie, this was the scene the studio wanted me to cut the most from the script, right through, surprisingly, to when I had my cut of the movie done. I had contractually 3 screenings that was my cut of the film. The final cut of the film isn't necessarily antagonistic, but every director tries to create the ability to have his edit of the final film used, or at least screened for an audience so it can be judged in front of the producers. The studios and the producers try to retain the right so they can keep the final cut in case they want to change something for some reason. I don't know, it's a classic battle between the business and the arts. And this scene, right up to the final cut, was a scene the studio felt didn't make any sense and was a little too crazy, and it was just lucky for me, the first time I screened it for an audience, they rated it their favorite scene in the whole movie. That was an ad-lib. That lady did not know she was going to be kissed by Jim Carrey. He surprised her and got a very real reaction. Anyway, the Cuban Pete scene is probably the best single piece of work in the movie for Jim. It's his real voice singing. It's all his real dancing. It was a crazy idea that seemed to work well ultimately for the movie and be a real highlight in the film. And the dancers and the different extras playing police did a terrific job. It was just like being back in the 40s, getting to do a real musical on the back lot there. It was really like a dream come true for me and Jim both. It's one of those things you just don't get to do these days as a filmmaker.
Seatbelts.
I missed it.
This thing with Dugan and Riegert almost became kind of like the Laurel and Hardy of cops, these little comments to each other. This sequence is fun and interesting for a couple of reasons to me. First of all, it's again one of those things where we got a lot of production value out of the set. The set is actually an ancient paper mill that we made look like a newspaper printing press, and of course brought in all these newspapers. It's just one of those things where everything in the scene worked out well. And I knew when I started this film, somewhere I would be stuck with a speech with someone telling my hero, it's not the mask, it's what's inside that counts. And that is the theme, but I knew it would be so damn corny. One of my very first ideas in developing this story was, I wanted that to be the alleged good girl giving the speech, and I always wanted to hear, when the hero says, "Do you really mean it?" I always wanted to hear the girl say, "Actually, no." Just turn the tables on the audience. So, for what it's worth, this was the most fun for me. I never liked Lois Lane. I always liked the girl who was the vamp in these movies, and for once I wanted to do a film where that snoopy, smart Lois Lane character wasn't necessarily the good girl by the end of the piece.
Gosh, Peg.
Look at Jim. He really did bring himself to tears for that. It was quite a performance.
No.
And there's our change-up.
What took you guys so long? I've been vamping here for like 20 minutes.
I'll tell you what I actually shot here, because I wouldn't say carried away, but it turns out Peggy's just in it for the money. Edge City's a tough place to live, and she needs the cash too, and it turns out she's not such a good gal. She double-crosses Stanley here. And what ultimately happens in this scene, as you'll see coming up in a second here, is our villain Dorian puts the mask on. But what you're not going to see was the final ending to the scene, which I'm sad we couldn't use because it was a very powerful moment. But once he turns into the Dorian mask, we call it the Dorian mask because Dorian puts on the mask. He grabs Peggy. In the cut you're about to see, Peggy more or less just is standing there with the rest of them, and you don't know what happens to her. But originally, he turns into the mask, our villain, grabs Peggy the reporter as she tries to sneak off with her money, tells her, "Peggy, a girl like you deserves to have her face plastered all over page 1, and throws her up in the air. It was a terrific stunt. Of course, we used a stunt double. And she lands in the printing press. And I did a Lumicrane shot that goes across the entire printing press. You see the girl get sucked into the giant rollers. And we pulled back across the entire length of the printing press, which is quite a bit longer than you see in any of these shots. It was only finally revealed in this Lumicrane shot. And at the end of the shot, you originally saw newspapers coming out with her picture on the cover saying, "Reporter killed in terrible accident." But when we put the whole movie together, we realized it was, even though it wasn't really graphic in any way, and it was a very surreal kind of thing to do to a character, we realized it was just a bit too scary for the tone of the rest of the movie. So you'll see that in the present cut, Peggy simply disappears from the movie. In the original, she was destroyed. This made Amy Asbeck and her agent very happy because she'll probably pop up in Mask 2. We'll see.
Hey, Orlando!
Here's Milo. Now, this is the point of the story where our Milo the dog sort of really shows how smart he is and brave he is, and there's a lot of things between now and the end of the movie that really paid off working with this little dog. Those looks, all those little looks and the takes to the bad guys are something that were painstakingly worked out between me and the trainer so we can keep him interesting. But I have to tell you, the dog really does have a great personality and really was a special pooch. You almost always have dog doubles. Look at him running here. He's a hero. You always have doubles for your dogs, and this is the first time we actually never used his double. The dog was always there, ready to work, always wagging his tail, looking forward, I think, to the attention and the doggy treats he gets from working. I think he had a sense that that was his job and enjoyed his work. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. And also, his double was his mother. The only other dog that looked like him was his mother. And I like to think that it's out of respect to his mother that he never made her work. She always got to sit back in the trailer.
Ipkiss!
Wait! I can explain everything!
Oh, yeah? Explain everything? Explain this. Get him up! Come on, let's go. I gotta sell for you, pal.
Here we are on stage again. It's always interesting, these intercutting locations in stage and lighting effects. I know it's the very probably simplest thing about filmmaking, but it's also one of the hardest to make it work just right. And here's Max going through his paces. I really went for it here. I didn't want this movie to be farce. I wanted us to care about Stanley. I wanted us to care about his dog. It breaks my heart to think of being in jail and my dogs being stuck outside, so I went with it. It's a little corny, but so sue me.
Hey, you with the face.
It was the nature of this film on a tight schedule and a tight budget for what we were trying to do. It was a very ambitious film. But it was the nature of this film that we seemed to always start with the mask makeup because it took Jim 4 hours. And it only took like a half an hour to rip the makeup off and change him back into Stanley. So Cameron Diaz, who plays Tina here once again, is consistently stuck in being the last scene. And here we are doing interiors on a night schedule. Once again, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. She looks great. She knows her lines. The scene works. It's just one of those things. It was always her luck that it took us just a little too long to do the mask work, and her close-ups would be the last thing in a movie. Normally, the leading lady would get her close-ups first. You want her to look great, and particularly someone who's an ingenue, who's doing a lead for the first time. But I'm telling you, try doing dialogue at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning sometime, and you'll see what these folks went through, and they really put their hearts into it, and I think it's a cute scene. I had to always do something, though, at the very end. I always wanted to build something into a scene at the very end that kept this a comedy, even though I wanted to have my fun with romanticizing it. In this case, it's Jim just almost getting that kiss, but not quite. Watch his lips on the second take. His lips just about leave his face trying to reach the girl. And I think it's one of his better little moments.
You're welcome.
You know that night at the club? I knew I'd found someone special.
The mask.
Oh. It's the guy inside the mask. It's you, all along. Stanley.
Okay, lady, time's up.
Could I have just...
Here he goes. Watch this little take he does. Just about, not quite. He'll get that kiss before the show's over.
But I'll let you know as soon as I can.
Once again, in the final editing of the show, we, under the studio's guidance, and I don't say guidance sarcastically because, you do get close to the show. This scene originally had Tina pulling a nail file out of her purse at this point. So what looks like a punch there, if you look at it again, I edited out the nail file because the producers thought it was too violent. And perhaps it was, just a little bit too ugly, and a punch worked just as well. You could argue in hindsight it doesn't make any difference, but it was one of those small editing things that comes up. By the way, I'm very proud of the toilet paper scene. Have you ever seen that in film before? No. Have you ever done it before? Yes. It's nice to see people acting like human beings, and just a little shocking.
Milo! 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 Good boy! Come on. Jump up. Come on. Can you jump up? Remember how I taught you not to jump up on people?
This next sequence, I recently met with one of my favorite filmmakers, Steven Spielberg, and he told me that this shot made him laugh. The shot itself, the fact that I chose to leave the camera locked off and let the dog enter in and out of frame, had him laughing hysterically. Those kind of choices are important in comedy. And then the trick is, on a film like this, you don't have time to cover it both ways, or cover it traditionally with traditional shooting as well. I'm pleased with that shot, too. It's very silly, but it's very sweet. By the way, that last bit of camera work with that whirling around is a wonderful shot we did on a Steadicam rig, which is essentially a handheld camera with a body rig. Very difficult to do, very difficult to time, and I think it gave what is probably not that original of a scene a little extra energy, the girl being trapped by the bad guys. It helped make it feel like her point of view with people closing in on her. It was a good solution. Sometimes you find yourself coming up against a scene in a story that, in your heart of hearts, is not such an original event, but it's important to the movie. And you have to think of a little bit of a fresh way to find something to make fresh about it.
Jump up. Get up.
Come on, Milo. Jump, please. Do it for Daddy.
Here's where Max starts to really earn his doggy yummies in this scene. This was something I discussed at length with the trainers because, again, I don't like dog tricks. And just pulling the keys from from a cop's pocket, it's okay, but it's not great. So Mike Werb, who wrote this draft of the screenplay, came up with this cheese bit, which I think is hysterical. But the idea had always been, the dog's not perfect. The dog's not a circus dog. It's really smart, but look at him trying to think. The idea for me was to always get the dog looking as if it's trying to understand, but not quite, and being very careful. When I first saw this trick, the dog just took the keys and did not look at the cop. And what I worked on was getting this look here, right to the carefully watching the policeman. The dog's natural inclination and the trainer's natural inclination is just to have it look at the keys and take them. The fun of the scene is to get a sense that Milo knows what he's doing and is really worried about that cop waking up. So we had to put a trainer up above the shot, trying to get the dog's eye line as it pulled the keys out of his pocket. And ended up being a really cute scene that showed the dog's personality very well. Do you guys know how many process shots? And this isn't a process shot, but it's these back seat things are so often phonied up. That particular one was a real one, but the nighttime scenes you'll see coming up were just a car being rocked by 2x4s with the two of them in the back of it. I believe in a lot of rehearsal. The nature of film, particularly with movie stars and the budgets, is you're very, very limited on rehearsal time, which always stuns me. I used to do plays in college where we would rehearse for a couple of months. On film, you're lucky if you get 2 weeks with the actors involved. They're all on different schedules. But the fact is, I was lucky in this case, and we did a lot of rehearsals in my home, and a lot of them were physical things, like this scene you're watching now. We just had a lot of fun. Jim Carrey and Peter Riegert here were in my home. Jim Carrey's vice is caffeine, so I would always have double cappuccinos ready for him, and we actually came up with the gag you're about to see with Jim's arm behind his back. We had no joke here. We had an escape from the prison and no joke. And we were working on what would happen between two guys physically with handcuffs on until we came up with something we thought was cute. And of course, at this point in the story, I used the dog for every cheap punchline I possibly could think of. He was my ace in the hole.
Why don't you just sit back and relax, okay?
Now, for the sake of argument, you're looking at a classic process shot. Those lights behind them are not even cars. They're electricians with lights. And the trick is to keep changing the light and rocking the car inside so it has a sense that it's changing. By the way, this is the old Coconut Grove. The nightclub we used to be a rockin' nightclub back in the 20s and 30s. It's shut down now, and we brought it back to life for the movie. This used to be one long, complicated crane shot. It's one of those things that directors do for their egos and for the love of a movie. I wound up cutting it right here. Oh, wait a minute, right here. When in reality, it was just one long shot that introduced pretty much every character you've seen in the picture. But frankly, ultimately, it slowed the movie down. So, hated doing it, but we chopped it up. It was one of those Robert Altman forever shots that introduced different characters. Once again, this is a nice example of practical filmmaking solutions. This whole club was built within an existing building instead of on stage. It saved us ultimately a lot of money. It made it more difficult because you have less control in a real building, but there was already kind of an Art Deco flavor to the walls, and then we just built our club within that, and it did have a stage. So, we created a club greatly from scratch, but it was an economy to do it with these real stone walls and everything in this room in downtown LA.
The next employee who's come for his back pay? Or should I say?
You'll notice I put little eye reses on Dorian. Whenever he gets really angry, his eyes light up a little bit. It was a very interesting CG effect that DreamQuest did for us. Boy, was this gunfight violent before they made me edit it down. I actually kind of got my Sam Peckinpah moments in, and you're seeing the short version because, once again, at the end of the day, we wanted to appeal to a wider audience. So Quentin Tarantino will sleep well tonight. I love this effect. It's just such a strange idea. And if you look closely, you can see the bullets in his mouth before he spits. The idea was to use some of the same kind of cartoon-inspired imagery, but do it in a more diabolical way.
I will be your host for the remainder of the evening.
This little dog actually was very easy to get him to kiss anybody. It was a very lovable dog. So the idea of Peter Riegert's hand being cuffed and getting dog kisses against his will, I thought was very funny.
Watch it! I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna have to lock you in. Use the radio. What? Huh? You know, call for backup or something. Milo, this could be dangerous. You stay here and be a good boy. Daddy's gonna have to go kick some ass.
He's a dead man. Hey, take it easy. I got the point.
When I was talking to Jim about the character of Stanley originally, and we were working on it, he actually based it on his father, who was a very... I've never met his father, but according to Jim, is a very nice man, trying to be a gentleman, trying to get by, and a good Canadian father, and ultimately... seeing Stanley, who's this sweet guy, being forced into heroism and kind of going over the top when he has to, ended up being a good way to play the scene.
Look, take this gun. Start sneaking people out the back. Right.
You two step back. You don't know who you're talking to, do you? Talking to a dead man if you don't step back, like I said.
Hey, don't you have respect for law and order? What kind of thug are you, huh?
It's all set, Dorian.
Excellent.
Does that Dorian makeup look just a little bit like Ronald Reagan to you guys? I'm not sure.
In 10 minutes.
This is a moment of truth. When a man shows what he's really made of. Grab. Drop it, Edkus.
And here's the payoff to Milo's work in the show. I just love the silliness of this doggy, super dog heroism.
Hey, boss. Look who decided to crash the party.
Hi, Dorian. How's it going?
Bring him up here!
Dorian, wait, no!
There's no time for last requests.
But all I wanted was a kiss.
A kiss.
Just one last kiss.
Dorian, I can't shut this thing off.
A great number of these effects, really the actor has no way of knowing exactly what you're going to do in the end, and it becomes almost a timing thing where I'm counting off screen for what I'm going to put in later. I'm actually giving them time counts for how long to lean forward, and what I'm going to do with their faces later has to work within that time frame. So there's a certain amount of mime work in some of this stuff. There's those eye reses again. I just wanted to give accents to that face, that particular makeup. Jim and I worked out a technique for the mask that became very natural for both of us on that kind of timing. And Jim's imagination is ballistic, so he had no problem imagining what was going to happen and playing for it. This is the football scene. The mask, to get an effect like this, I put basically the mask is on a fishing pole with a bit of line, and line removal is now common in film, so even though you could barely see the wire, we removed it anyway. There's Milo's heroic moment, and I'll tell you what I remember more about that scene was getting the orchestra to give me all those horns in his triumphant moment. The Dublin Symphony Orchestra really had to crank out the horn section for Milo's triumph. Here I knew I had a challenge at the ending of the picture. You've seen so many effects. How could I possibly, create a climax to this film? And it occurred to me, if the dog put the mask on, it's the one thing they wouldn't expect, and the one thing everybody would love. And what was tough about this was the design work. I wanted it to look a lot like the dog. It needed to be a caricature of the dog. Our original designs from Industrial Light and Magic were too well inspired by Tex Avery. I think we talked about Tex Avery's cartoon work from the 40s too much. But we finally came up with this design, which looks like, to me, like Milo's fantasy of always wanting to be a bigger, tougher dog. And when you put the mask on, what's inside comes out. And there's his humor again. It couldn't just be a monster. It had to be a dog that would laugh and have fun, too. So, if what's inside of that dog's heart is wishing it could be a bigger, stronger dog, that's what happens when he puts the mask on. And I gotta tell you, out of all the effects that were hardest to know how they would ultimately work out, the effects of Dog Mask were the toughest. That laugh is great. And the dog did raise its leg on cue, and the dog pee is an optical effect that was put in later. So, for those of you who really care about those things, that were 3 different elements. I thought it was... Ooh, that's a nice bite. I thought it was important for Stanley to defeat Dorian on his own without being the Mask first, just to prove that Stanley could do it. But I also knew that the audience would like to see the Mask again at the very end of the movie. So I didn't want to end the movie here. I knew, even though Stanley had to grow and become courageous over the course of the film and stand up for himself and not be such a wimp, once I have him defeat Dorian as Stanley, I had to have him win the day as the Mask one last time. And to tell you the truth, out of the whole film, one of the things that's funniest is, before all this process, working on the script with Mike Werb and later on with the actors, drawing what the effect we call... I drew what we call super guns a number of times just on napkins and things, and that effect is coming up. But super guns is always one of the most amazing things for me to see, because having sketched it, part of me didn't believe it could be done, because it's such an outrageous visual. Those guns have to come from nowhere, look gigantic, and go back to nowhere and be believable. But the technology was just at the point where we could do that. And watch the different pieces of it cock. And, isn't that fun? And then since it's the Mask, he doesn't really kill anybody. We wanted it to be a joke in the end, rather than blow people up. Is this the classic ending or not? Save the girl from the dynamite. But if I'm going to do a classic ending, I have to end it with a very unusual way. So the belly explosion was I thought, an inspired idea, and of course the burp. This stuff is so technical and takes so long to stage with the VistaVision camera and get everything just right. What's the artistry involved is making it look spontaneous and quick in the end, and you need a performer like Jim Carrey to make that work.
This guy's incorrigible.
This is a surreal idea, but I think I've seen things like it in some of the Golden Age cartoons, so at this point in the movie, I don't think anybody was worrying about logic too much. The Mask is magic. If you put it on, you can paint a flush handle when you want one. That water effect, like the Crazy Leg shot, was one of the most difficult things to achieve, oddly enough. You never know what is going to end up being tough when you're more or less inventing new things. And the water was a combination of real water elements and computer graphics. Peter Green was shot on a turntable, not even on the set, and all those elements were combined together to create the look of him being flushed away. He almost gets that kiss again, but I try to never quite give it to him until the very end of the movie.
I've always wanted to say that. Come on. Give me that gun.
When I saw first assembly of the film, this is where I knew I had the movie I wanted, because I actually felt sad. It's obvious that the movie's over, and as a viewer, I kind of felt sad it was ending. This is one of those obvious wrap-up scenes. But it's nice, because you reprise every character in one way or the other. They all get their last little moment here. And Stanley is now such a changed man that he stands up for himself. He's happy to take the spotlight now. He's got the girl. And again, it's that kind of fairy tale thing. Call it corny, but I think it's fun.
Hey, wait.
Couldn't resist putting the dog in. Never could resist putting the dog in at the end of these scenes now.
I want to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning.
Yes, Your Honor.
Boy, that doesn't sound good at all.
No, it doesn't sound good. What would sound good to you?
Breakfast.
Shut up!
This is an interesting scene. We shot it, of course, out of context in the middle of the movie. This is a bridge overlooking a particularly unbeautiful view of the city of Los Angeles. So when you see the city, know that the entire city is a... I don't know if you call them matte paintings anymore, because they do them on computers now. It's a digital painting. So that city you see, only a few of those buildings existed. We added the rest, and all the water you see just to the right of Cameron's elbows is phony water. And you can even see the rippling in it. It's a very nice job by Industrial Light and Magic. Again, phony buildings. And of course, he deserves a kiss, I think, after this whole movie, and they really went for it. Now, if your buddy threw away the mask, I mean, I kept thinking, those are the classic things to do. How could I one-up them? I wouldn't let that thing get away, and neither would Charlie. And by the way, jumping into, that's actually the San Pedro Bay, is no small thing to do. You have to test the water to make sure that the pollutants are at a safe level. So we spent a lot of time protecting the actor from the water of Los Angeles. I shot a couple of alternate endings. I didn't know whether him yelling smoking at the end would be just a little too silly. But the ending with just a kiss didn't have the energy of the rest of the movie. This movie is silly at its heart, and if you can't watch it with a good spirit and enjoy it for what it is, then you shouldn't have come. I wanted to throw a party on the screen, and we had some fun doing it, and I hope you guys had some fun watching it too. I have no idea what we're going to do for Mask 2. We'll see what happens, but I hope it has some more dance numbers. That's one of the things that was really unique for all of us in film. It's common in rock video, but you just don't see contemporary musicals anymore. And if we had one or two more dance numbers, this would have been a musical in my point of view. As it is, it's just, I'm not sure. They keep asking me, but I think it's a romantic fantasy adventure. It's wish fulfillment. And the whole idea of a mask and the masks we wear and what would happen if you put on a mask that would make your inner desires possible is a fascinating, resonant idea. I actually think most sequels the world could do without, but I know there's more that can be done on that theme, and there's something so much fun about this particular actor, Jim Carrey, with his energy and his physical abilities playing the mask that I personally would like to watch Mask 2, so maybe I'll become involved in creating it. We'll see. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks a lot.